The wind had been building all afternoon, like something with a grudge. The kind of Kansas wind that didn't just blow, but remembered every slight the land had ever suffered. Dorothy Gale, 12 years old and already carrying the weight of too many funerals in her small chest, stood at the edge of the failing cornfield behind the farmhouse. Her parents had died 2 years back in a truck accident on the state highway. Black ice, they said. But Dorothy sometimes wondered if it was the land itself deciding it was tired of them. Aunt Em and Uncle Henry weren't cruel. Not exactly. They just looked at her like an extra mouth in hard times, another shadow in a house full of dust and debt. "Mind the chores, Dorothy," Aunt Em would mutter, her eyes hollow as the dry well out back. "We ain't running a charity." Uncle Henry barely spoke at all anymore, just sat on the porch with his pipe and stared at the horizon like it owed him something. Toto trotted at her heels, the little black dog, her only real friend in the world. He didn't judge. He didn't sigh when she forgot to pump water or left the chicken coop unlatched. The farm was dying around them, corn stalks stunted and brown, soil blowing away in gray sheets that stung the eyes. Dorothy kicked at a clod of dirt and felt the anger rise hot in her throat. She was bad. That's what they thought, even if they never said it out loud. Bad luck, bad blood. The kind of girl storms followed. That night the sky turned black as pitch by supper time. The radio crackled warnings about tornadoes, but Uncle Henry just shrugged and kept eating his beans. Dorothy helped clear the table, her hands small and chapped, and when the first low moan of wind rattled the windows, she felt it in her bones, like the storm had her name on its breath. "Get to the cellar," Aunt Em snapped, but it was too late. The world outside screamed. Dorothy grabbed Toto and ran for the storm cellar door, but the wind snatched them both up like toys. The house lifted with a groan of old nails and splintering wood. She saw the farm shrink below her, Uncle Henry's truck tumbling end over end, the barn roof peeling away like paper. And then something moved inside the funnel, a shape too big and too alive, writhing with eyes that weren't eyes. It looked at her. It knew her. She woke to silence and the smell of rot. The house sat tilted in what had once been a town square, boards cracked and shingles scattered. Sunlight the color of old bone filtered through dust. Dorothy sat up slowly, head pounding, Toto licking her face like he was afraid she'd gone somewhere he couldn't follow. She pushed open the door and stepped out into a place that felt wrong in her marrow. Munchkinland, the locals would call it later, though the word tasted like ash on her tongue. The little people, gaunt, no taller than her waist, dressed in clothes that had once been bright, but now hung faded and threadbare, stood in a ragged circle around the house. Their faces were pale, eyes wide with the kind of fear that comes from living too long under something bigger than you. Rotting cornfields stretched in every direction, stalks whispering in a breeze that carried the faint scent of something sweet going bad. Abandoned houses sagged along the square, paint peeling to reveal gray wood beneath, like the whole place was being eaten from the inside out. A creeping entropy they called the gray had already claimed the edges. Fences turned to dust, a rusted pickup truck from the 50s half swallowed by nothing, just gone. Under one corner of the house lay the crushed body of an old woman. Her legs stuck out, skinny and blue-veined, toes curled in silver slippers that gleamed too clean against the decay. The little people muttered and crossed themselves. One of them, a man with a wispy beard, whispered, "The Witch of the East. She's gone. The house. It took her." Dorothy's stomach turned. She hadn't meant to kill anyone. She was just a kid, trying not to die. A woman appeared then, stepping from the crowd like she'd been waiting for the right moment. She was taller than the others, pale as milk, dressed in a white gown, stained at the hem with the same gray dust that seemed to coat everything. Her eyes were kind but tired, the kind of tired that had seen too many children swallowed by the same slow doom. The Good Witch of the North, they called her, though her voice carried the weight of someone who knew the land was losing. "You've done a great thing, child," she said softly, kneeling so their eyes met. The East Witch held power here, but the Gray was taking her too. Your house, it was a mercy in its way. She reached down and gently slipped the silver slippers from the dead woman's feet. They were old, scuffed at the toes like they'd walked 1,000 hard miles, but the silver still caught the weak light and held it. The witch held them out. "These are yours now. They belong to her. Wear them, and they will protect you better than anything else in this place." Dorothy hesitated. The slippers felt cold when she touched them, colder than the morning air, and for a second she thought she felt a pulse, like a heartbeat under the leather. They fit her small feet perfectly, as if they'd been waiting. But something in them wanted things, wanted her. A faint tug behind her eyes, a whisper too low to catch. She stood up, wobbling a little. "I just want to go home," she said, voice cracking. "Aunt Em and Uncle Henry, they'll be worried." She didn't believe it even as she said it. The Good Witch's smile was sad. "This is Oz, child, and Oz is being eaten. The Gray turns everything to dust and forgotten things. To find your way home, you must follow the yellow brick road to the Emerald City. The wizard there, he has power. Old power. He can send you back." She pointed across the square. The road began there, bricks the color of old bone and pus, cracked and uneven. A few of them looked wet, like they were sweating. "Stay on the road. It knows the way. But be careful. It knows other things too." The little people cheered in thin voices as Dorothy started walking, Toto at her heels. The silver slippers clicked against the bricks with a sound like distant thunder. Behind her, the Munchkinland Square grew small, the Gray already creeping closer to the houses. She didn't look back. She was afraid if she did, she'd see the old witch's legs twitch one last time. The road stretched ahead, endless, into fields that whispered her name in voices that sounded almost like her mother's. The yellow brick road didn't feel like bricks under Dorothy's feet. It felt alive, warm in places, cool in others, as if it were breathing. Every step in the silver slippers sent a faint tingle up her legs, like the road was tasting her. Toto trotted beside her, ears pricked, growling low at nothing. The rotting cornfields pressed close on both sides, stalks tall and blackening, their leaves rustling secrets she almost understood. The Gray had claimed whole patches already, corn turned to fine powder that blew away when the wind shifted, leaving nothing but memory. By midday, the road began to show her things. It started small, a shimmer in the air ahead, like heat haze. Dorothy saw her parents' truck on the highway, headlights cutting through snow, her mother laughing at something her father said. Then the crash, metal screaming, glass shattering, and the vision twisted, Aunt M's voice overlaying it. "You were supposed to be with them that night. Bad girl." Dorothy jerked to a stop, heart hammering. Toto whined. The bricks beneath her feet had darkened, a thin red line seeping up between the cracks like blood from a cut. She wiped her eyes and kept walking. The scarecrow waited a mile later, nailed to a post in the middle of the worst corn patch yet. He hung there like a man who'd been hanged and forgotten, arms out, head lolling. His body was a sack of old clothes stuffed tight with straw, but the straw moved. Crows inside him, alive, pecking and shifting. One black eye peered out from a hole in his chest. His face was stitched leather, pulled tight over something that used to be human. When Dorothy stopped, his head lifted with a creak of dry joints. "Well," he said, voice dry as husks, "ain't you a sight? Girl in silver shoes. Come to take me down or just passing judgment?" She should have run. Instead, she stepped closer. The crows inside him cawed softly, like they were arguing. "Who are you?" she asked. "Used to be Professor Elliot Crow. Taught literature at the State College before I did what I did to those students. Things you don't come back from." A crow poked its beak through his neck, and he winced. "They stuffed me with straw to keep the body useful. The birds keep the thoughts fresh. Punishment, I guess. The gray don't let you die clean." Dorothy climbed the post on shaky legs and cut him down with a rusted knife she found in the dirt. He fell in a heap of straw and feathers, then stood, brushing himself off. The crows settled. "Name's Scarecrow now, I suppose. Mind if I walk with you?" Got nowhere else. They walked together as the sun dipped, the road growing darker. He told her stories, twisted fairy tales where the heroes always paid worse than the villains, and she told him about Kansas, about the anger that lived in her chest like a second heart. The road listened. It showed him his classroom once, students' faces turning accusing, and he froze until Dorothy took his straw-filled hand. Tenderness in the middle of horror. That night they camped in a hollow where the corn thinned. Toto curled against her. The scarecrow didn't sleep. The crows inside him never did. By morning the illusions were worse. Her parents waving from the road ahead, then rotting where they stood. The bricks bled more freely now, sticky under the silver slippers. The forest closed in by the second afternoon, trees twisted like old men in pain. The gray had reached here too, bark peeling to reveal gray rot beneath, leaves falling as ash. Dorothy's feet ached in the silver slippers, but they kept her moving, pulsing faintly like they approved of the pain. The scarecrow walked with a limp in one straw leg, crows muttering about sins. They found the Tin Man beside a half-chopped stump, axe buried in the wood, body half-rusted metal where flesh should have been. His face was still mostly human, but one eye was a glass lens, and his chest plate creaked open to show gears slick with black oil. "Can't feel," he rasped when they approached. "Accident in the woods years back. Kept cutting till there wasn't enough left. Replaced what hurt. Now emotion. It starts the pumps. Heart attacks in oil." A tear of black fluid leaked from his eye as he spoke of his wife, long gone, and the pain seized him, gears grinding, oil spraying across the leaves. Dorothy helped oil his joints with a can he carried. The scarecrow patted his metal shoulder with straw fingers. "We're all broken," the scarecrow said quietly. "That's Oz now." They hadn't gone another mile when the lion came crashing through the underbrush, a massive, mangy mountain lion with scars across its flanks and human eyes. It shifted as it saw them, bones cracking, fur receding, until a war veteran stood there in tattered fatigues, trembling. "Name's Leo," he growled, voice hoarse. "Desert storm. One night I lost it. Woke up with blood on my hands that wasn't mine. The curse followed me home. Shift when the fear takes me. Coward through and through. Scared I'll kill you all." The group was complete. 4 broken things and a dog, walking a road that bled their worst memories back at them. The gray thickened. Vines reached like fingers, illusions of safe Kansas kitchens that dissolved into graves. Dorothy felt the anger in her soften into something like family. They shared stories around a fire that night, the lion shifting back and forth in his sleep, the Tin Man leaking oil when he remembered love, the scarecrow's crows quiet for once. Tenderness, yes, but the dread grew. Something in the trees watched with the gray's empty eyes. The Emerald City rose on the 4th day, like a fever dream gone wrong. An old Midwestern fairground swallowed by vines and rot, lights flickering green in the ruins. The approach had been worse than anything the road had thrown at them before. For miles, the yellow brick road widened, the bricks growing smoother and warmer, almost fleshy, pulsing in rhythm with Dorothy's heartbeat. The silver slippers tugged at her feet like eager hounds on a leash, pulling her forward even when her legs screamed to stop. The gray had retreated here, as if afraid of the green glow, but its absence felt worse, like the land was holding its breath, waiting for something worse to fill the space. The scarecrow walked with his head tilted, crows shifting restlessly inside his chest. Every few steps, a black beak would poke through the burlap of his neck, tasting the air. "This place stinks of old lies," he rasped. "I can smell the lecture halls again. The way the students looked at me after what I did." His voice cracked like dry straw. One crow cawed softly, almost sympathetic. The Tin Man's metal body creaked constantly now, the fresh oil from their last campsite already turning thick and sticky. He kept one hand pressed to his chest plate, as if afraid the new emptiness there would rattle loose. "I don't want a heart," he said quietly during one rest. "Not really. Feeling is what broke me the first time. But the road keeps showing me her face. My wife, smiling right before the accident. Then the blood. Always the blood." The lion padded beside them as a man more often than not, shoulders hunched inside his torn fatigues, eyes darting at every rustle in the dead grass. "Coward," he muttered to himself. "That's all I am. One wrong shift and I'll tear you all apart. Should have stayed in the woods. Should have let the gray take me." When the fear spiked, his hands would tremble, and fur would ripple across his forearms before he forced it back down. Dorothy said little. The slippers whispered to her in the voice of the wind that had taken her from Kansas. Low, intimate, almost loving. You belong here, with us, with the anger. She squeezed Toto tighter against her side. The little dog hadn't stopped shivering since the forest. They entered the fairground through a sagging gate, still painted with faded carnival letters. Welcome to Oz, where dreams come true. The words had been clawed at, as if something with too many fingers had tried to scratch them out. Rusting Ferris wheel skeletons loomed against the sickly sky, one car dangling by a single chain, swaying though there was no wind. Tilt-a-whirls lay overturned, their once bright paint now the color of infection. Green floodlights, old fairground bulbs somehow still working, cast everything in an emerald hue that made their faces look drowned. The wizard waited in the central hall, a godlike shadow behind curtains of velvet eaten by moths. He wasn't human. Dorothy felt it the moment his voice boomed. Parasitic, ancient, feeding on the hope they carried. The central hall, where he stood, had once been the big top, now a sagging ruin draped in moth-eaten velvet curtains the color of old money. The wizard's voice rolled out like thunder wrapped in an old shroud. Step forward, travelers. Let me see what the road has broken today. They obeyed. The illusions began immediately. For Dorothy, her parents stood on a porch that looked almost like home, smiling, arms open. Her mother's laugh filled the air, warm and real. Then the scene cracked. The porch became the wrecked truck. Her father's head lolled at a wrong angle, blood on his teeth as he whispered, "You were supposed to be with us, Dot. Bad girl. Always bad." Dorothy cried out and stumbled back. Toto barked frantically. The Scarecrow saw his classroom. Young faces turned toward him in trust, then twisting into accusation as the crows burst from his chest in the vision, pecking at the student's eyes. He dropped to his knees, straw leaking. The Tin Man watched his wife die again, this time in slow, loving detail, her hand on his cheek right before the chainsaw slipped. Oil leaked from his eye sockets. The Lion saw the desert night, sand turning red, his own hands, claws, ripping through his squad. He shifted halfway and roared in agony before forcing himself back. "You want home?" the voice sneered from behind the curtains. It sounded amused now, like a man watching ants burn under a magnifying glass. "Bring me the staff of the Witch of the West. She's the one spreading the gray. Kill her, and I'll grant what you seek. Brains, heart, courage. A way back to Kansas for the girl. Simple." The companions argued for hours in the rotting fairground shadows. "She's too strong," the Lion whispered, curled in on himself. "I'll freeze. I'll shift and kill you all instead." The Scarecrow's crows were in open revolt, flapping inside his head. "The staff is power. The witch is the gray. Taking it might make things worse. We're already broken enough." The Tin Man stood rigid, oil dripping from his chin. "I can feel the pull already. If I care too much about protecting you, the heart mechanism will tear me apart before we even reach her." Dorothy listened to them, small and furious and 12. The silver slippers pulsed hotter, almost burning. "I have to go home," she said finally, voice small but hard. Even if it's bad there, even if the storm is waiting, you don't have to come. But they did. Of course they did. Broken things recognize their own. They left at dawn, the silver slippers burning hotter now, urging her on. The journey to the West Witch's farmstead took another day of nightmares. Flying things stitched from roadkill and stolen souls wheeling overhead, child-sized and screaming. The road showed Dorothy her own anger as the storm itself, alive and hungry. The road grew spiteful as they left the ruins of the Emerald City behind, the yellow bricks softening underfoot like rotting meat. Dorothy's silver slippers burned with each step, not hot enough to blister, but enough to remind her they were alive and impatient. The gray pressed in from all sides now, swallowing whole sections of the corn behind them with a sound like dry, whispering laughter. The scarecrow's crows never stopped their muttering. The Tin Man's joints squealed despite fresh oil. The lion padded ahead in cat form, mangy fur bristling, then flickered back to the trembling veteran when the fear took him. Toto stayed pressed against Dorothy's leg, growling at shadows that had no right to move. They walked for what felt like days, but was only one long, bleeding afternoon. The road showed them what it wanted. Dorothy saw her parents again, not the gentle illusions from before, but their last moments. The truck spinning on black ice, her mother's mouth open in a scream that looked almost like Dorothy's own name. The bricks wept thick red tears that clung to the silver slippers. You brought the storm. The road seemed to murmur through the soles of her feet. It came because you were angry enough to call it. I didn't, she whispered, but the words tasted like a lie. The West Witch's domain announced itself before they saw the house. The corn here was black and glistening, stalks fat with something that moved under the husks. The air smelled of spoiled milk and wet pennies. Flying shapes wheeled overhead, monkey things stitched from roadkill and children's nightmares. One had a cat's head sewn onto a boy's torso. Another dragged the limp wings of a dead crow stitched to its shoulders with rusty baling wire. They screamed in high, stolen voices. The lion roared and charged first, shifting mid-leap into the massive mountain lion. His claws tore through one monkey thing's chest, spilling sawdust and black fluid that stank of embalming fluid. But another landed on his back, small child hands wrapping around his throat, and he screamed, a man's scream coming out of the lion's mouth. The scarecrow waded in, straw arms swinging, crows exploding from holes in his body to peck at stitched eyes. Feathers and rotting meat flew. The Tin Man swung his axe in wide, mechanical arcs, but every time a monkey thing's blood, thick and wrong, splashed his metal chest, the gears inside him seized and black oil sprayed from the seams in his neck. Dorothy ran toward the farmhouse, silver slippers pounding. The place squatted in the center of the dead fields like a tumor, weathered boards the color of old bone, windows glowing faintly with the same sickly green she'd seen in the wizard's hall. The front door hung open, inviting. Inside, the kitchen smelled of baking bread and decay. The West Witch waited at the long table, once beautiful in the way a faded photograph is beautiful. Her skin stretched tight over sharp cheekbones, hair still thick but shot through with gray strands that moved on their own. She wore a widow's black dress, stained at the hem with the gray. Her eyes, when they fixed on Dorothy, were hungry. "Little girl," she crooned, voice sweet as poisoned honey. "All alone with your broken toys. Children make the best fuel, you know. Their fear burns so clean." She gestured, and more monkey things dropped from the rafters, child-sized horrors with human teeth. The battle in the narrow kitchen was ugly and intimate. The lion crashed through the door, half-shifted, blood on his muzzle. A monkey thing latched onto his arm, and he panicked, bones cracking as he tried to become the man again. But the shift caught halfway, leaving him a grotesque hybrid howling in pain. The scarecrow tackled two of them, straw spilling from fresh tears in his chest, while his crows screamed. One monkey ripped a handful of straw from his throat, and the professor's voice came out thin and broken. "I'm sorry. I was sorry." The Tin Man stood over Dorothy, axe raised, but emotion, real, protective rage, triggered the heart mechanism. Oil fountained from his mouth as he collapsed to his knees, gears grinding like broken teeth. "Can't feel this. Hurts too much." Dorothy heard a voice in her head, though heard was too strong a word, as it seeped into her thoughts, cold and insistent, carrying a single word: water. Somehow she knew the voice came from the silver slippers. She grabbed a bucket from the sink. The water inside was murky, but it was water, and something in the silver slippers flared white-hot as her fingers closed around the handle. The West Witch laughed, a sound like dry leaves scraping across a grave. "You think water stops me, child? I am the gray. I am what's left when hope rots." She raised her hands, and the gray surged, walls bleeding dust, floorboards crumbling. One of the monkey things seized Toto, lifting the little dog toward its jagged mouth. Dorothy screamed, pure 12-year-old fury, and hurled the bucket. The water hit the witch across the face and chest. It did not melt her like something from a children's story. It unraveled her. The witch's face sagged, as if the water were acid made of time itself. Skin sloughed away in wet sheets, revealing muscle, then bone, then nothing but gray dust that poured out of her sleeves and collar like sand from a broken hourglass. Her eyes, still alive, still hateful, stared at Dorothy as the last of her mouth dissolved. "You brought it with you," the witch whispered with her final breath. "The storm was always yours." The body collapsed into a pile of fine gray powder that smelled of forgotten attics and old grief. The monkey things shrieked once and fell apart, stitches unraveling, roadkill bodies slumping into heaps of bone and fur. Silence fell, broken only by the drip of black oil and the soft cawing of exhausted crows. They took the witch's staff, a gnarled length of blackened wood carved with screaming faces, because the wizard had demanded it. No one spoke much on the walk back. The lion limped as a man, blood soaking his fatigues. The scarecrow clutched his torn chest, straw leaking with every step. The Tin Man moved like a rusted machine on its last gear. Dorothy carried Toto, the little dog trembling against her chest, and felt the silver slippers grow colder, satisfied. The Emerald City's green lights flickered weakly when they returned. The wizard's voice boomed from behind the velvet curtains in the fairground hall, but it sounded strained now, almost desperate. "Bring the staff forward, girl." They did. The illusions flared one last time. Happy Kansas, smiling parents, a life without anger. But Dorothy saw the seams this time. The wizard granted his gifts with theatrical flourish. For the scarecrow, a new brain, a wet, living thing pulled from somewhere behind the curtain, still attached to trailing nerves that screamed in a young man's voice. The scarecrow shoved it into the cavity in his chest anyway, crows fighting for space, and his eyes filled with fresh, terrible knowledge. "I remember everything now," he whispered. "Every student, every mistake." The Tin Man received a heart, slimy, black, pumping thick oil. When it was installed, he cried real tears that mixed with the oil and burned his metal cheeks. The pain made him seize again, but he smiled through it, a broken, grateful smile. The lion was given a medal and a drink from a bottle that smelled of battlefield courage. He drank, shuddered, and for a moment stood tall as a man. Then the fear returned, deeper now, tasting of blood. He wept quietly behind the others. Dorothy stepped forward last. "Send me home." The curtains ripped aside. The wizard was no man. It was a thing of smoke and ancient hunger, a parasitic shape that had worn 100 faces across 100 dying worlds. It fed on belief, on the desperate hope of broken travelers. Its true form writhed, tentacles of gray mist, mouths that opened where eyes should be, whispering every sin Dorothy had ever carried. The silver slippers flared. Light like molten silver burst from them, burning away the illusions, exposing the parasite for what it was. It shrieked and shrank, retreating into the shadows of the fairground ruins. "You cannot go home," it hissed. "Not clean." The Good Witch of the North appeared at the edge of the hall, white dress now streaked with gray, her face older than before. She did not smile. "You have the power, child. The slippers have always known the way. Click your heels 3 times. Think of home. But know this, Oz does not release easily, and Kansas has been waiting." Dorothy stood at the threshold with her companions. The scarecrow with his screaming brain, the Tin Man leaking oil, the lion trembling between shapes, Toto in her arms. They looked at her with something like love, the broken kind that survives anyway. She could stay. Part of her wanted to. Here, at least, her anger had purpose. Here, she wasn't the bad girl. She was the one who ended the witch. But the road whispered through the slippers. Home. She clicked her heels once. The fairground lights flickered. Twice. The gray surged at the edges of her vision. 3 times. "Take me home," she said. The world spun. Wind, screaming, the same funnel that had taken her now carrying her back. She heard her companions calling her name, voices fading into the storm. Then came the impact. She woke on the dirt floor of the storm cellar beneath the Kansas farmhouse. Sunlight slanted through the cracked door. Toto licked her face frantically. Dorothy stood, silver slippers still on her feet, though they looked like ordinary scuffed work boots again. She climbed the steps. Aunt Em and Uncle Henry waited on the porch, older, hollower. The farm looked exactly as it had: dying corn, sagging barn, dust blowing across the yard. But something moved behind the barn. A shape in the wind. A flicker of yellow brick where the path to the outhouse should be. The gray had followed her. Thin tendrils of entropy already turning the edge of the cornfield to powder. Dorothy looked down at the boots. A faint red pulse glowed once, then died. She walked toward the house. Aunt Em's eyes widened at the strange boots, but she said nothing. Uncle Henry stared at the horizon the way he always did. No one gets out clean. That night, as Dorothy lay in her narrow bed listening to the wind, she heard the corn whispering again. It knew her name. It knew her anger. And somewhere out in the dying fields, the yellow brick road waited, patient as rot, ready for the next time she needed to walk it. The storm had never really left. It had simply come home.